Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Shtermach, and this is Red Lines, a show where we dare to touch topics that are considered red lines for many and try to cross them. Today, with me, we have Yaroslav and Operator Starsky. Please say hello,
Hey
everyone.
everyone.
Hello.
And if Operator Starsky is a common figure on our channel and on the Redline show for you, then Yaroslav is kind of new to our channel. Please, can you introduce yourself and say what do you do on YouTube and what is your blogging interests?
On YouTube, I have a channel called Savage Sage where I expose the true face of Moscow Empire, as I call it. I bust Moscow myth, one per time or in bulk. So that's what I do.
Mr. Starsky, can you introduce yourself too?
I'm a Ukrainian veteran, 10 years in service. Currently, I'm running Propaganda Study Institute to debunk Russian disinformation and myths like Yaroslav does as well.
Okay, so I'm glad to meet both of you. And let's talk today about the history. History is a front line for Russia, for example, for sure, because they've been trying to eliminate the cultural identity, the history of nations and peoples that they conquered. Once Ukraine was a part of the Russian Empire, we had Ukrainian language and literature banned. They even stole our name, as Yaroslav can tell us later. And in the Soviet Union times, for a short period, there was like some nationalization and Ukrainization period, which ended with Stalinist repressions, and most of the poets and writers, screenwriters, directors being executed. They executed Renaissance of Ukraine. So let's start with this. Yaroslav, please. It is your topic. Start with it.
Yeah, indeed. There was a brief period of so-called Ukrainization. It was meant to serve because the Soviet Union was just getting together and they needed the national movements to help them build the Soviet Union, and they needed to make an illusion like it's going to last like this forever. They made it one like they wanted to imitate and pretend like, oh, this is what it's going to be like moving forward in Soviet Union. We're going to totally respect your identity, your culture. That was, of course, a lie. As soon as Soviet Union got a bit of strength, Ukraine had a executed renaissance, whereas communists, Muscovites, they assembled all the Ukrainian elites, poets, writers, composers, and they just shot them all. That was in the 30s. So a period of Ukrainization was just an imitation, a charade.
Okay, maybe Mr. Starsky can tell us something about the information warfare and Russian aggression information since 2014 as a veteran of the 2014 war too.
Basically, all Russian invasion was based on things like brotherly nations, on things like liberating people of Ukraine that are like technically Russians, but they think that they're Ukrainians because they were told so by evil West. And they used, of course, things like Russian language as one of the foundations of their invasion, which is, again, they always promoted the idea that if you have two languages in the country, there will be unity. But if you have only one language, which is Ukrainian, there will be always conflicts between people, which like complete lie. I cannot swear
Nonsense.
in this video, unfortunately. Thank you. But how do you like that? And since 2014, we saw a lot of cases of Russians using this fake idea of brotherly nations, used in order to justify their invasion, justify their crimes and atrocities. Basically, they were the force that killed most people of Donbass, claiming that they were basically protecting people of Donbass. But they are very, very good at this, and unfortunately, a lot of people in the West underestimate Russian lies and Russian propaganda, thinking that people are too smart to believe that, but unfortunately, it's not so, and all those conflicts that we saw is good proof that Russian propaganda and Russian disinformation is unfortunately very, very much effective.
Yeah, Yaroslav, I remember that Putin believes there was no Ukraine and it is an artificial country. And in your video, I saw a shot where he was demonstrated a map which allegedly doesn't have Ukraine on it, but in fact there was inscription Ukraine. Please, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Indeed, Putin was presented a map. I bet it was all staged, but basically 30 centimeters from their eyes there was written Ukraine, but they didn't see it. They were saying there is no Ukraine, which just showcases the length to which they will go to deny that Ukraine exists and Ukrainians exist. And there are certainly lots of old maps that don't show Ukraine on it, but just by coincidence, that map had Ukraine, and it's almost like it's almost as ridiculous as flat earthers, because I mean you're looking at it's right there, but they still deny it, and they deny it because if they admit that Ukrainians are separate people, then they have to question their own identity. Wait a minute, who are Russians then? If Ukrainians are the ancestors of Russian people who lived from Rus, where are Russians coming from? And if they start questioning it, then they will find out that Russians only appeared as nationality like 100 years ago during Stalin, because before that there was Velikorossi, or they called themselves Great Russians, and before that they were called Muscovites. And the Great Russians, Velikorossi, is artificial rebranding. It's the same as Russian is an artificial rebranding. And the fact that their roots are not even Slavic in origin, and they try to pretend that they are Slavic in origin, and just the rabbit hole of lies of empire trying to boost its prestige. And it was common for empires back then, Germany was pretending to be a Holy Roman Empire, but at least it controlled Kiev or Rome when it started. But Muscovites didn't even control Kiev when they started trying to pretend to be trying to lay their claims on Russia.
Yeah, and Russia is yes, Operator Starsky.
Yeah, as much as I love Germans, they're great people, but Holy Roman Empire was not holy, definitely not Roman, and 100% not an empire. But speaking of that absolutely ridiculous case with Putin and the map, there was literally saying Ukraine, land of Cossacks, as far as I remember, but I don't really remember if there was a title for Russia, or was it Muscovia? We gotta check, because Russia only emerged in 18th century on the maps, and before that you can find a lot of maps literally saying either Kiev. Boplan has plenty of them showing Ukraine, land of Cossacks. There's a lot of versions, and generally there's most of the time you can see the title for Muscovia, where Russia currently is. I think that Yaroslav already explained that in his video on his channel, but this is something people should know.
Yeah, so if I am correct, the name for the Russian Empire was created back in the 18th century to develop the title of the empire to the Muscovy, and they started erasing national cultural identity since then of other peoples, and continuing the topic of so-called cultural proximity of Russians and Ukrainians, the brotherhood. We have a film, Deaf Lovers, made by a Russian director who emigrated during the full-scale war, and it tells a story of depicts a story of love between a Ukrainian girl and a Russian young man, and it's an image. So it is. It works for the Russian propaganda, like saying, you see, politics are not important, people are everything, and they are basically in love with each other. And the war is because some people, bad people, don't want to let them unite. What can you say about this type of propaganda?
About the fact that it's all Putin. They're trying to outsource the blame, their collective blame for one guy, which is ridiculous. It's like, I guess, with saying that it was not Germans, it was just one Hitler. Same kind of analogy. Uh, I mean, those people. I have a theory that those people, they're raised in an environment that doesn't teach people to take personal responsibility. If you look at the Muscovite culture, it teaches to be lazy. It teaches it encourages to steal. It encourages to be brutality, to suffering. The whole culture is enveloped so that people would actually feel no responsibility for what they're doing, because everything's already decided by the bigger guys, the leader of the tribe. This is also really tribal instinct here playing, and this is how they developed, and that's why we see that in so-called liberals that are basically just the same as pro-war Muscovites. They're the same imperialists, having no empathy. This is another quality of Muscovites that is not being educated in their society. They don't know how to feel themselves, and they don't know how to feel others. It's a society that's in deep dark ages in terms of emotions, in terms of understanding and compassion. If you look at Navalny, she had a meeting just like a couple days ago, and she hadn't mentioned Ukraine at all. That doesn't matter, Ukraine or whatever. So they're just the same imperialists, and it's sad to see that the Western world doesn't seem to realize, especially considering that they have exchanged them for real criminals. They have exchanged real criminals for those imperialists. So, but this is what I see as part of my channel, to bring this education forward, to reveal that veil of what is going on behind the mask, because Muscovites are really good at masking, at hiding. And now we see the war has lifted their mask, their true face is showing, but still they're really good at hiding it. So
if I may, I would like to add that culturally you can see such a big difference between Russians and Ukrainians. For example, when there is some kind of unpopular unpopular decision issued by the government, you can see always full streets of people protesting against it, because this is us. When there was a fire in the Chernobyl area before the full-scale invasion, I remember our brigade sent our firefighters there to deal with the fire. But what people did, there were hundreds of different volunteers literally climbing the roofs and measuring the level of radiation. People are engaged in life, in the social and political life in Ukraine, always. And this is like one of the reasons which is not really good, but at the same time it's absolutely amazing that we have, is that we don't really recognize authorities. Traditionally, that's just my own opinion, but traditionally Ukrainians are like anarchists. We love to live in small communities. We love to trade and cooperate with other communities. This is how we did like hundreds and thousands of years. We don't really recognize authorities. We like to uprise against them and stuff when they do something bad. Remember, there was a fire in Russian Kemerovo where children died in the cinema. I don't really remember any protests after that. I remember what happened in Ukraine, because in Ukraine, Klitschko was running and around and checking all the cinemas to make sure that that stuff won't happen in Ukraine. People were like writing, messages like crazy on the internet. In Russia, kind of meh, like children burned and died, whatever. But returning to that movie, from the standpoint of mythological design, there's a lot of hidden messages in this movie, by the way. First of all, why Ukrainian is a girl is because, and I believe in gender equality, but on a psychological level, it means that the dude will dominate, right? Which, by the way, so hard to dominate Ukrainian women, I can tell. And why can't they speak? Well, it's because, again, it's a hidden symbol that explains that Russians don't have freedom of speech. Ukrainians really, again, dictated what to say and what to think, and things like that. It's like the idea of movie, Peace for All, very good, very brilliant. The reason it was made sucks, because it's literally, after the war is finished, and there will be a lot of people saying, let's forgive Russians, let not ask them to pay reparations because they're just such good people, like we love each other, brotherly nations, etc. This is a weapon on a psychological level. It's a cultural weapon, and Russians like them very, very much. Like that movie about Russian soldiers at war, like depicting absolutely, naive Russian guys with wide soul, with good intentions, with deep internal microcosmos, who like, well, yeah, we fight because this is for our country. Maybe it's good, maybe the reason is wrong, but we do what we have to do. I have a family, I have 5 kids. But if you really want to see Russians at war, you gotta go to Bucha and see the place where the mass grave was found. I brought a lot of journalists back in the days in 2022 to this place to show them what happened there. Look at the pictures from Bucha, Irpin, from Hostomel, all the people found dead in the basements. Look at the theaters bombed by Russian aviation with huge letters saying children on both sides of the building. That is the real Russians at war. And Russians are basically trying to use art to fix their image and reputation, which works, unfortunately, because people are convinced that art is besides politics. You can ban Russia today, like on the digital, in the digital network, you can drop it from your satellite list of satellite channels, etc. But you cannot block art because, like, it's against freedom of speech. And this is something that we should think about, because unfortunately, we don't really understand that art can also be used as weapon, and art can deliver our messages to much broader audience than just daily reports. That's just my opinion.
And sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have not a suggestion, maybe I observed an observation about Russian art and culture, which is absolutely devastated inside Russia, but which is presented so good at the Western point, in America, in Europe. They invested billions and billions into presenting their culture, their mysterious Russian soul, to Germans, to French people, to British people, to Americans. Maybe I will ask Yaroslav about this. Why this works? Why this idea of a mysterious Russian soul, this romance of Russian swamp, let's call it like that, and Ivan and the wolf is so sticky. I would say this term, so sticky for Europeans.
Right. It seems like the fear from the post-Cold War era is still lingering in Western people. They still, but on the Moscow side, there is no more fear of the West, and they feel the weakness of the West, the spinelessness of the West, and they play on it. They abuse our democratic values, like what they do with immigration. They just shout people to finish or polish borders. How they meddle in the elections, how they completely twisted our freedom of speech, and they put the Palestinians for Europeans to sympathize for Palestinians who elected Hamas and the terrorist organization who initiated a terrorist attack on Israel. The Moscovites completely won that media war, and we just have to do our best to counteract it and resist it.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I remember that basically yesterday or 2 days ago in the Columbian University, there was a memorial for the leader of Hamas that basically initiated that massacre in Israel. Just so people could understand the level of insanity. And while like there's massacres on both sides, and like people in Israel, people in Palestine suffered, but the initiators, of course, were terrorists from Hamas that are currently being brought, like their images are being brought to people as if they were heroes. Which is completely wrong, which is something that will not stop violence, but will only increase and multiply violence among people, among society on the West. And this is something that Russia absolutely loves. There was a case several months ago in Paris where several people were arrested for vandalism. So what they did, they were basically, this is on you can find it in Google, they were basically drawing Stars of David on a school. And when you walk past the school looking at those stars, you think, like idiots, why the hell do you destroy the image, the facade of the school with like paint drawing that stuff? It's just one of hundreds of cases, one of hundreds of methods of raising, the level of hate in the society and make people fight each other, which is Russia is absolutely efficient at. But I have a question to Yaroslav, which, again, a lot of people ask me, but I would really like to know your opinion because I really don't know what to answer them anymore. In case, let's just imagine, all right, in parallel reality, Putin disappeared, Shoigu and like all their elites disappeared, and the Russians are brought like democratic values, like it happened back in Glasnost times and after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They were brought like democracy values and stuff, opportunity to elect their democratic leaders. Do you believe that Russia will change instantly? Do you believe that it will take them, 2026 elections, boom, and they're peaceful democratic country like, Italy or Romania?
I think unlikely. Those people have never had a successful experience of what is it like to live with freedoms. On top of that, I think the moment they have real freedom, as we saw with Soviet Union, the empire would collapse because the empire is glued on lies and control and fear and terror. As long as you dissolve that glue, Chechen Republic, Buryat Republic, Yakut Republic, it's just a matter of time. And the empire is going to collapse regardless. So pushing Moscow Empire to be democratic is actually beneficial because it's pushing it to collapse, to cease existing. And once it ceases existing, it's going to be beneficial for everyone on this planet, including the so-called Russians themselves. I call them Muscovites because this is the core of their what do you call it, ethnic core of what Russians are composed of. Now, of course, Tatars, anyone is called Russians. So pushing it for democratization is going to dissolve the glue. And but I think it's definitely not going to be a smooth transition.
Thank you
Yes,
so much.
and I remember some videos because I wasn't alive at the time when in the 1990s, peoples of different autonomous regions in Russia and national republics of Russia, they were standing for their sovereignty and they were protesting, they were demanding sovereignty for their decisions for themselves. They didn't want to be completely subdued to one center in
It's
Moscow.
because they had nothing to eat.
Probably.
That's the only was. I think there were only two reasons why Russians are gonna rebel: they have nothing to eat, or they're not gonna have police to beat them.
Oh,
It's one of the two.
but if we talk about 1917, there was indeed police, but the people were so desperate that the Red Coup, the so-called Bolshevik Revolution, took place. And let's remember the revolution of 1905, and they still had police, and that revolution was crushed, totally crushed.
Indeed, but what we see from Soviet Union and from what I believe, as long as those people have something to eat, they don't. They're never going to rebel. The whole entire country's policy is, I'm outside of politics. The entire country empire is living an illusion, is living like a joke. If you heard the joke, hey, Daddy, which concentration camp are we going to? Like, I don't know. I don't care about politics. This is the epiphany that Russia is living in. It's a joke that turned into reality. People just like, I saw an interview of people from Suja, of Russians who, and they asked, hey, when did the war start? And they didn't say 24th February 2022. They said 6th of August. They like, for them, the war started like a couple of weeks ago. It didn't start years ago. They didn't care. They don't know. There's just another good proverb that says, "My house is at the edge of the village. I don't care."
Well, that's a Ukrainian proverb, if I'm not mistaken.
There's another proverb that I like. It's good where there are no Russians. Хорошо там, где нас нет. But it's good where there are no Russians. Just modified it. It's true. While look at the United States is preparing a satellite, what do you call it? A space shuttle to swing around Europa to look for signs of life. Muscovites are storming, destroying Ukrainian cities and spending their resources into terror. Just this culture, it's not doing good for anyone on this planet.
Which I remember, someone has counted how much money was spent on the war, and it was enough to build roads for the entirety of settlements in Russia and provide gas, I believe, for 70 or 80% of the settlements. It wouldn't be enough to provide to 100%, I believe, but still, yeah.
It would be enough to build the entire city and move anyone from Donbass who was oppressed to live there and give them pensions and salaries. It would be enough money. Yeah.
Well, that would be if they were right and truthful and they really wanted to do something good. But in reality, it was just a pretext for destruction, for war. And maybe Baratar Starsky can tell us a little bit more about it from his experience, that war is the way of life for the empire. As Catherine II has told, the empire must expand or it will collapse. And yeah, I am interested in one question. What could happen with Russia in case of a ceasefire with Ukraine. So the war machine is operating. If the war stops, stagflation will erupt, and most of the money is put into military-industrial complex. So there are jobs there. They're producing means of destruction and death. What happens if and when possibly there will be a ceasefire? We're not talking about territories, about the current front line. Just if the war stops today, what will happen?
May I answer this one?
Yeah, I'm addressing this to you.
Thank you. Two things may possibly happen. Thing number one is, which we will not see, is Russian Empire will not survive, because that's a fact. Empires can only survive while they conquer different territories, while they expand to other territories, grab their resources and things like that. That's the thing that moves, that runs the empire. Listen to Dugin, for example, Russia's most prominent ideologist and terrorist, Putin's best, teacher and mentor, who basically says, he talks about it. He says that our expansion won't stop just in Ukraine. There's like the whole world. And he talks about it very, very often. He doesn't say about, returning the so-called native Russian lands. He talks literally about the world domination, because he's crazy enough to believe in this. And this is, again, something that motivates Russian elites, that Russian elites used to motivate their slaves, their population, that we will take Ukraine, then Berlin, then Alaska, and things like that. And people believe in this, 2/3 of them don't have in-house toilet, but they believe that they're empire and they're proud of that. So if Russia stops military activities, they will collapse. The reason for that, which it's very, very obvious, is that instead of investing into military industry, they will have to invest in building schools, improving welfare, things like that, providing their schools in Altai with heating for the first time since 80s, repairing schools, because as far as I remember, more than 1/4 of their schools currently require renovation, or 1/3, like whole schools in Russia, 1/3 of all schools require renovation as of this moment. But what's the point of renovating schools if you need to kill Ukrainians, right? So what happens next after they start growing, raising the well-being of the population? The population will start demanding other things like freedom of speech, freedom of thought, because you won't find a country where people who have those freedoms also have rich life. Doesn't exist. You won't find it on the map. There's no empire where people's freedoms are suppressed, where people have rich life. China doesn't count at all. And by demanding this, eventually they will evolve to, to what, for example, United Kingdom evolved to. They got de-imperialized, decolonization. This is something inevitable. And Russians don't want that to happen, of course. So that is one thing that may happen, but it will not happen. What is more plausible to happen is that Russians will basically regroup, invest more into production of tanks, production of strike drones, of course, and long-range weapons, and they will attack one more time eventually, possibly even by the end of the decade. Because currently there's a lot of, let's say, information coming from the intelligence services of European countries and also in the United States that Russia is preparing for the European invasion by the end of this decade, and they're growing their forces for that.
Yeah, so Basically, that is not plausible that if there were ends that Russia will collapse imminently with all their military mission working right now, they will just seek another enemy. And even preparing for a 5-6 years, maybe a decade, to invade Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, will be enough for them just to sustain this impulse, this inertia of expansion, of preparing. Oh, we will invade them soon. We will have war. We have a purpose to live. And I remember there was some gossip, probably in the media, about secret points of Zelensky's victory plan presented to Trump, uh, like deploying Ukrainian defenders, Ukrainian armed forces in Latvia, Estonia. So deploying Ukraine's front force, defense force, which must hold back the Russians in the first weeks of a future possible invasion, until NATO troops arrive, like until United States army is logistically transported to Europe, and some forces go from Poland and from Germany. Uh, it is a possible point of a future ceasefire agreement that Ukraine has guarantees of security from countries, maybe from NATO, from European Union, from separate countries, but Ukrainian army will be deployed in NATO countries to help protect those most unprotected parts of the alliance. We're not talking about Finland, which has very powerful military, which will be aided by Swedish air forces and Swedish navy forces. Finland has a very strong ground army, which can and will hold back the Russians in those terrains. But Latvia and Estonia, they are basically uncovered. They don't have their own aviation. They don't have their own big force. Even those a couple of weeks will let people in Estonia and Latvia mobilize themselves to the armies because they have this militia-based reserve. And is it really a nice idea? What do you think, maybe Yaroslav, from a historical, and Starsky from a historical point of view, as we look back, this cooperation, is it positive for Ukraine?
I think for sure it's positive to be selling this picture to Trump, who is playing isolationist policy, and he certainly is going to be happy to pull out troops from Europe, and if he sees that he can keep the stability of Europe by substituting with Ukrainian forces, Trump is that pragmatic, and it's going to look good on TV. That's what I believe motivates him most. It's going to look good on TV. He's going to go for it. On top of that, I like the pitch of Ukraine for resources. Help us here, give us a loan, and you can. We'll sell you our resources for whatever. I think that's a good pitch. But ultimately, discussing scenario if Moscow is going to invade Latvia, Estonia, I think that's a bit too far-fetched plan. It's so many variables must align for that to go right, and I don't believe it's going to be likely. I think they're already throwing everything they have at us, and I think if it's going to be, I believe for as long as the war is going, because Putin has a personal invested interest in it. For him, if the war goes on, he is in power. If the war stops, and wait a minute, what did he achieve and why would it stop? Like, he has no interest for it to stop, because continuation of war means he's staying in power. And I believe the only reason it would go to stalemate if it's going to be either going to drain all the resources or it's going to be beneficial for them to stop. But in which scenario it's going to be beneficial for Putin to stop the war, I don't see that scenario. Unless also China plays here a big role. Like, if China stops supporting Moscow today, the war will end in like a month, I believe. The same with Europe, actually. They still buy. I think we got to talk more about that. Europe buys Moscow gas and oil. Last I checked, they paid for the last 3 years $200 billion. That's like, on one hand, they're funding this war, and on the other hand, they're trying to help Ukraine, but clearly not they don't see how much, they don't see the benefits of their investments. Unfortunately, what I call a breadcrumb policy, what they give to Ukraine. And I think we have to expose that. We have to raise awareness to Europeans and say, hey, while like in Berlin and in Stockholm, you're having cocktails for 30 euros per cocktail, like Ukrainians are, like your comfort is like, or like your comfort costs at Ukrainians' lives. And I think we have to be raising awareness around that, to limit sponsoring the war and buying empires' resources.
A very nice thought, by the way. Speaking of buying oil and gas, I also checked that information because, according to the statistics, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they bought enough resources from Russia to fund another 1.5 years of Russian war in Ukraine. But at the same time, since the very first day of the invasion, they gradually decreased buying oil and gas in Europe from Russia. But at the same time, now we can see countries like Spain and Belgium buying more LNG, the liquid natural gas from Russia. So they switched their sources, the import to other countries, to Canada, for example, but LNG still comes from Russia, which is, again, it's a big problem. But regarding Ukrainian troops, it's a brilliant idea, of course, but I really want to see Ukrainian troops in other countries being there, as already NATO troops, as being NATO army. That would be probably logical. But there is something really important I would like to talk about, because if the war in Ukraine stops, there is a danger of imminent attack on Baltic countries. Why is that? Currently, we can see that elections in the United States finished, and all that massive wall of disinformation that Russia was literally throwing at Americans every single day doesn't really have much sense now. And they can now switch their attention from the United States to Europe. They operated in Europe as well, of course. If we're talking about the documents that were presented by the Department of Defense, by the FBI investigators, Russian agencies were working in European countries, in Germany, in France, raising, the level of hatred, of fear in the population. They had those, I still can't comprehend, they had KPIs of raising people's fear of future in countries like Germany and France, about 50%. How the hell do you like that? That is insane. But problem is, currently Russia is busy with fighting in Ukraine, throwing majority of their troops, majority of their vehicles, and spending majority of their resources. Even though they're busy, they keep running their disinformation in the European countries. But if they are given a pause, if they're given a chance to, take a rest and accumulate more resources, etc., the biggest problem will not be their military power. The biggest problem will be their disinformation, because it will grow tenfold. And what we will see as a result of the Russian disinformation in European countries will be European countries quitting NATO. And as soon as that is happening, we will see Russian so-called peacekeepers, basically same Russian invaders, only wearing blue berets and
occupation force.
Yeah, and UN mandates. They will be coming to those countries. So that is the biggest problem. As soon as the war in Ukraine stops, the war in Europe begins. And this is something that people must understand, and we should do all we can to stop them in Ukraine for good, once and for all. This is freezing conflicts freezing the combat, the violence will not work. It will continue eventually, but already in other countries. And we will see massive disinformation coming from pro-Russian paid speakers in those countries. We will see far left and far right movements growing in those countries and calling people to quit NATO, quit European Union. That is the biggest danger that we will face very, very soon.
Yeah, they could demand a corridor to the Königsberg through Latvia.
Suvalki Gap.
Yeah, and they might have a blackmail saying, "Hey, this is ours. If you dare do anything, we're gonna nuke you. Like, we're gonna nuke New York if you interfere. What you gonna do?" It's a situation that the whole world should try to prevent. The Western world and NATO should try to prevent. And I agree. This is the best opportunity to stop them in Ukraine once and for all. It's like eradicating a smallpox. Just deal with Moscow Empire once and for all. Help Ukrainians do the job for you, because the empire has grown on your money, just like China, by trading. And I don't know, what do you guys think about the hypocrisy of the EU? Or like they claim human rights, so concerned, but like at the same time the human rights end at the border of EU in a way. It's like, oh, Ukraine's over there, doesn't matter. What do you guys think about that? The hypocrisy, should we be exposing the hypocrisy of EU, or should we try to look past that and have more friendlier tone?
Well, you have human rights abuse in Hungary right now with laws and legislation against LGBT people rights and against migrant rights, against any basically nationalities. It's a strong example of a country inside EU and NATO that is very anti-EU and NATO.
It's another case of hypocrisy.
Two things here again. Two sides to this question. EU is a very complex thing, and for example, Ukrainian refugees who live in the European Union, they are protected by the 24th paragraph of European Union. It's not like the countries are giving them refuge. They are protected by the law that covers the European countries, members of the Union. So they introduce a lot of good things. I think we must talk about the hypocrisy in frames of parties, politicians, pro-Russian or Russian, literally, assets within the European Union. And also, I would really like to talk about such funny thing as United Nations. Because this is something that we should talk a lot, my friends, and we should bring this information to people, because this is something, absolutely useless and pointless, and I would say dangerous as well, because when Guterres, for example, has brunch with terrorists and internationally wanted criminals in Kazan, it questions the legitimacy of International Crime Court, right? Like, do we even care that such organization exists, right? So United Nations, there's a lot of Russian talking heads on the TV spreading Russian narratives in the European Union. I would say their number is a bit more than 1,000 people. They're like very, very active speakers on the television, in the media. Majority of them are in the United States, based in the United States, but approximately 1,000 different so-called opinion makers. They're in the European Union, and they help Russia spread their narratives.
So let's finalize this with some topics and examples. Maybe Yaroslav, you have some more remarks, and Mr. Starsky, and we will have like a final thought to end this discussion for today.
I have one remark about the, how do you call it, the mysterious Russian soul?
Yeah, I call it the mysterious Russian soul.
Do Europeans and Americans, do they have that notion that Russia? I think they do. Yeah, if you look at the caricature maps, they always depict Russia as something unfamiliar, and they clearly, yeah. I think this is a translation from Moscow language, but in a sense, indeed, Europeans don't understand what's going on. It's really a mystery what's going on in there, and I think it's a mystery to all people who have dignity, of like, how could you sacrifice so much human lives for the ruins of Bakhmut? Like, it's a mystery to me. How come people in Moscow Empire look at that and like, yeah, that's a fair trade, 20,000 of our people for the ruins of Bakhmut? It's like, put it on a scale, good enough, let's keep moving. It's like, what's going on in their heads? It's just insane.
My friend, I received that commentary during the battle. I don't remember, was it Battle of Bakhmut or Battle of Avdiivka? One representative of this amazing community of people said in his own language, like, I don't really know why they hate English so much, like, but anyways, he said literally, yes, we are angry, and he said, yes, we are stupid, angry, and we die in big numbers, but we will still win, which basically characterizes all Russian nation. Guys, we gotta be very tolerant to each other. We gotta love other people for what they are. When we talk about Germany, for example, this is the land of beer and amazing sausage. When we talk about France, this is the land of wine. Same with Italy, also pizza and spaghetti. Every nation is absolutely beautiful, and it's very, very much, I would say, special. There are special things that make people in those countries special. And I can hear keyboard or something like that. Nasty sound. Yeah, but speaking of Russians, I remember the words of famous Russian anonymous, right? Famous Russian anonymous, who approximately in early 2010s said one phrase that describes Russia like 100%. He said, and he's Russian, he said, Russia, and remember that, is a chaos of crap and death. And when you think about it, well, yeah, it is. Like, literally, looking back at all the centuries of the Russian history, yeah, that's the thing that characterizes Russia 100%. It's a perfect description. Therefore, yes, I believe they have future. Yes, I believe that we also have future with Russian neighbors, because generally nobody likes to have atrocious terrorist neighbor who always wants to kill you. Eventually, we will all evolve to this understanding that it's better to have them, staying there peacefully, quietly, not touching anybody, not threatening anybody with nuclear weapons, and maybe in like 100 years we will have some kind of trade agreements and relations. But it's very, very unlikely that having whatever Russians have right now, which is Russian elites, Russian atrocious culture, and Russian imperialism and chauvinism that they literally drink with mother's milk, we will see at least tiniest changes in the Russian agenda in the observable future. Again, that is just my opinion.
So thank you very much. Yaroslav, Andrei, Operator Starsky. I enjoyed this conversation very much, and I hope to see you again on this channel, especially Yaroslav as our new guy on UATV, and Mr. Starsky as a host of Frontline Focus weekly episode each Monday on UATV English at 10 p.m. Kiev time. It can be a different time depending on your region. Thank you very much, you both. And I am really happy that we have such conversations and hope that many people will look into them and understand us and understand the Russian soul and its roots better and why it is not so fairy tale, a fairy tale that is being presented to people in the West. Thank you very much.
Amen to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Have
Thank
a
you.
nice evening. So that was all for today. Red Lines, a show where we try to distinguish and cross some topics that are not usually for discussion. It was Pavlo Shtermach on UATV. Subscribe, like, and share this video because it is really important for us that you support our channel and don't let propaganda win. Have a nice evening.